Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai ki te hui o te komite hāpuri ahurea me ngā rangapu i tēnei rā. Kura mātua, tuarua, ngā mema o te kaunihira, tēnā koutou, ngā manuhiri me ngā kaimahi o te kaunihira, tēnā koutou. Welcome everybody to today's Communities, Culture and Partnership Committee meeting. Just before we get started, if you could have a quick read of the emergency procedures that are shown on screen. And while you're doing that, I'll just remind you to put your phones on silent. And we'll just bring up the karakia tīmatanga. Please feel free to join in. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea ngaro, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Ka mahia te hua, mā kihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, kia tūturu, kia whakamāua, kia tīna, hui e, tāeki e. Kia ora everybody. We have no apologies. We have Councillor Parkin joining by live stream. We will move to public comment. We have two people speaking. Angela McLeod, who is online. I'll just ask you to turn your screen on. Kia ora, Angela, and you've got 3 minutes.
Kia ora tātou. I'm so sorry I'm not there. I see some familiar faces around the table, and I hope you are all well. What I wanted to say was to speak to the item on the KAI, item number 5. I am here as one of the representatives from the Regional KAI Network, and we are focusing on equitable access to nutritious food. And I really would just like to say that that's a lovely report. I think that's a really good start to what the Lower Hutt community can be doing, and with your support and facilitation. I know as a council that you signed on to including the food system work in the future development strategy, and I see this report and the work indicated in it as part of that, and that is absolutely great leadership. I think from a leadership point of view, you and the rest of the councillors and staff are going to make a huge difference to your communities with this work, and can be leading in the Wellington region, and I would just like to thank you for that. There's been quite a bit of work being done around the region, around some pilot projects where there are places that are wanting to do further work in their communities. And so if there were any opportunity in the future to have a discussion around how you might be able to facilitate funding or facilitate funding providers, given that we know that it's a little bit tight at the moment in the economy, that would be really good too. But I really just wanted to say thank you, and please take the Chair's recommendation to accept all of the recommendations in the report. It is such a huge step forward for the community and for equitable access to nutritious food. So thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Angela. He pātai tō ngā mema. Does any member have a question? Any questions for Angela? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, Angela. Thank you for your comments. Just wondering, in terms of phase 2, which we're looking at, is there anything that you think we should be specifically following or making sure that we investigate?
Yes, so phase 2, well, it's actually really important to take on board what the community are needing. And some things can be really, I think, easily done from a council's point of view that might not necessarily cost a lot of money, such as checking in on how the district plan could facilitate community gardens, for example, our new housing developments. I noticed the other day I was driving down, High Street down into Taita, and there's those great little buildings between the Chinese shop and the liquor store on heading into Taita there. Well, where are those people going to access their own food or growing their own food? And so, maybe in those developments have some sort of workaround or provision for that, provision for things such as, the developers don't take all the topsoil away, actually leave it, for the people to use. So those are the sorts of things. Phase 2 is more too about, the pilot projects that we've got in the region. I'm hoping that Tessa is there from Regional Public Health, who might be able to speak more to the specific projects. But there is some great work, being offered, and they just need facilitation around funding.
Well, thank you.
Does that help?
Kia ora, Angela. Thank you for live streaming, and that was helpful. Next up, we've got Jonathan Gilbert. Kia ora, Jonathan. Yes. And just there's a button there to turn the speaker on, and you've got 3 minutes, Jonathan.
It goes green. Cool, look at that. So just to, I've only had half an hour to know that this was happening. So I've had a brief read about what's happening in item 7. And over the past year plus, I've been trying to get this sort of a thing going with the council. Last year, we had something approved in the short-term plan for $150,000 to go out to the businesses to make it available so that they could get CCTV cameras to aid their local communities around their areas. So far to date, I haven't actually seen anything other than this piece of paper to say that something's being done with that. Over that period of time, there has been hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of stolen cars, break-ins, robberies, all alike. To date, as far as the community is concerned, nobody knows what's happening. There's been nothing released by the council to say that there is stuff happening or any time frame to explain how long it will take for something to happen. Looking through this document, says lots of lovely things, that stuff's happening. I didn't even know we had a neighbourhood support group for the Hutt Valley. And looking at it, we've got about 300 members. I've been running the Hutt Valley Security Notice Board for almost 7 years. We've got 25,000 members. 90% of those are actually based in Lower Hutt. They contribute daily to providing information about what is happening, what they can do to help their neighbours, providing footage, providing evidence, providing information about what's going on. I've been doing that for near on 7 years with absolutely no assistance by any other party, particularly the council. It seems like this is a lot of information on paper. I'd love to actually see something actually happen. Even just one camera installed in an area that would be helpful. So far to date, all we've seen is the bus shelters be removed and the cameras be moved around. It'd be really good if we can get some information out to the public about what is actually happening, because, I mean, as far as they can see, they've got me to talk to about something happening. I've only got access to what equipment and infrastructure that I've got. Those that tell me that they've contacted the council about using their CCTV and try and get evidence from that have been very disappointed about the response back. I know that I've spoken with many police officers, many council people, many people in the community. I've visited almost every dairy in the entire valley, every bottle store, every high-risk location, bars. I worked at many of the bars. Many people in Lower Hutt know who I am and respect me and trust me to do what's right. It's gotten to the point now where I have to use that as the basis to actually push you guys to do something about this problem that we have in the Hutt. I know it's not limited to the Hutt, but there is a lot that can be done without a lot of financial input. And I just, wanted to make it clear to the council that the community want it.
Kia ora, Jonathan. Thank you for coming in. And just before I hand it over to if the members have any questions, I didn't catch, are you from a business?
So I'm just a member of the community.
Okay.
To be honest, I own a business, and I've been running a Facebook group called the Hutt Valley Security Notice Board for 7 odd years. But as far as having any authority or being in a position of power, no, absolutely not.
Okay. I'll get you the link sent for our reports because we have the city safety every 6 months that goes up online, and we'll send you the links to the community coordinators and what they do. It's on their website. Yep. So I'll get that sent and you can put it on there.
It'd be great to get that information, but...
Yep. I'll send you the link. Sure. I'll get the link sent to you, yeah. Members, any questions? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. And thank you, Jonathan, for coming in and highlighting all the work you have been doing. Would you be able to, no names or anything like that, would you have an idea of how many private security cameras there are throughout or connected through you that you're aware of?
So just by me and businesses that I've worked with over the years, we've got at least 25 public-facing cameras. But ultimately, what I have isn't really what's valuable. The community themselves have installed their own CCTV cameras on their own properties all over the valley, hundreds and hundreds of them. And daily we're provided footage from those cameras in response to information that's put up on our security notice board. And daily we're getting more and more footage from people to assist the police in being able to crack down on this. I'm in conversations weekly, if not every couple of days, with police officers in regards to what's happening.
Thank you.
Confirming, so it's working the relationship you have and the sharing of knowledge with the police?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thanks for coming in, Jonathan, and outlining your work because I was unfamiliar with it. I'm sorry, I haven't been on your Facebook page. So it's a voluntary role that
100%.
I'm trying to get my head around. So voluntary, you do it in your own time. You're a moderator of this particular page.
I work full time and I do this full time as well. So in between every job that I go to, every afternoon, every evening, every morning, every weekend, I spend my time reviewing everything that comes through this notice board, pulling footage, hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage in response to the information that comes through that page. Yeah.
Okay, so you suggest that you do a lot of work with the police, which is great. You link with them. Are there a lot of privacy issues? I'm just thinking about sharing stuff on your
As long
page.
as the information actually captures the incident itself. So say someone breaks a window on a car, someone attacks someone with a knife, someone steals a car and is seen in it. As long as the evidence actually does prove that person was there and did the act, then it can be publicly shared. All of that information does go back to the police, but we don't let anything that can't be or that we're at risk of defamation go onto the page. So if there's something that we can look at and go, well, it could be this guy or it could be some other guy that walked in a different direction, we wouldn't allow that sort of thing up on the page because of those defamation laws. Yeah.
So thank you for your work. I think there could be some links between us that could be useful and managed, in the proper way. So thanks for the work you do.
Sure.
Councillor Barrett, then Councillor Briggs.
Oh, yes.
Kia ora, Jonathan. Is there any areas of the city that you have been able to identify as worse than others?
Very good question. Realistically, I deal primarily with Seaview area and Petone. The amount of information, or amount of things that happen around the Seaview area, it blows my mind some days. But it does seem to be predominantly through Fairfield, Apuni, Waifatu, Seaview, and Petone, and then through Ellistown and Melling. We don't, in comparison to Taita and Nainai, very few reports really come from over there. I mean, they obviously do come from over there, but the major majority is of this southern end of Lower Hutt.
Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Jonathan, for coming in. Have you had any engagement with council staff, and what has been the result of that engagement if it's occurred?
So last year I had a meeting with the Mayor and Brady Dreyer in regards to all this, and I was guaranteed, well, I was told that it was a known problem, and that things would be done to try and assist in helping to cut down on that sort of thing. And then there was a fund of $150,000 created from that meeting for the purpose of doing exactly what I'm doing at the moment, which is trying to raise funds to install cameras around the area. So yes.
And so are there any staff members, though, so you've met with elected members, are there any staff members from Hutt City Council that you've met with, either in our neighbourhoods team or communities team or anyone else?
No, not directly, aside from those that have been a party to meetings that I've been a part of for other community groups. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for, one more question from Councillor Shaw.
Sorry, it just came to mind. You mentioned that you didn't know anything about neighbourhood communities. Now, one of the Facebook pages I do link into is the Hutt City Council one. And I understand that there has been some kōrero around there. So do you check in with with some of those programs that we do and see how you can help?
So to be honest, when I spoke with council, I kind of expected to be enlightened about whatever else was going on throughout the council, because council would be the ones to know about it. And therefore, when I'm having meetings with the council and trying to get action on these sort of subjects, I'd expect to be advised of what else was going on and maybe even connected with these other people. I was not. Looking at the numbers, I've been doing this for 7 years, and the neighbourhood support that's in your paperwork here says there's about 300 members. 300 members compared to what I've managed to achieve in the last 7 years is nothing, to be honest. I'm sure they do a great job and they do what they can. If they're funded, great. But without the funding, without the support, and with only myself and my time, I've been able to build a network of the community that has achieved just far more than anyone else that I can see.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for taking time to come in. We'll get your email address because I'm not on your Facebook either. And we'll send you the City Council link to the communities part.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
See ya. That's all for public comment. So we will move on to our first item, communities of interest, and it's update on Kai. It's on page 8 of the agenda. Barry Gall. Oh, ngā mihi. We'll just cover off item 4, conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict?
Yes,
Councillor Tupou.
Madam Chair, I am a volunteer of the Māori Wardens, Māori Warden volunteer.
Thank you. Get that noted.
I noted Paul Māori Taita Community Trust. I'm on that board as well too.
Get that noted.
I'm just noting my regular conflicts, particularly with Vibe and the Nano Boxing Academy. There's nothing pertaining today, but is around young people, so just noting I have those conflicts.
Kia ora, noted. Thank you, everyone. We'll move to our communities of interest update for Kai, page 8 of the agenda. Barry Gall, community facilitator, will speak to the item. Haere ki mua, Barry. And we also have Tessa Acker.
Kia ora koutou. I'm happy to take any questions on the report soon. Just want to draw particular attention to the regional food system strategy, or plan, I should say. Over the last few years, there have been conversations in council and in the community about the need for a kind of cohesive approach, a plan or a strategy in our city. At the same time, there was the development of a regional food system plan. We paused our own efforts to support that because that was going to do a lot of the legwork for us. An important consideration for us was that any plan be built on a Taumāori Te Tiriti foundation, and the regional food system plan has done that, with particular contribution from Healthy Families Hutt Valley. Apologies from Eddie Edmonds, the manager. His wife is at the business end of having a baby, so apologies there. And Eddie has been a great help to the development of that plan through linking to mana whenua, sharing insights and reports, focusing on Māori-led initiatives at kaupapa and tikanga Māori approaches. I would like to now hand over to Tessa. So no, I won't. I will hand it back to the chair.
Thank you. We've got Tessa Eka here from Te Whatuora, and the question I've got is, what is Hutt City Council's role in Regional Food Systems Plan, and how do we contribute to that? Kia ora, Tessa.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora for the question, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. Before I go too much into the role of council, I'd just like to direct your guys' attention to one of the handouts that we've given. Just so you can kind of, I know that a report has been sent out just with some of the basics of this regional food system strategy, but just to give you a snapshot of what the strategy is trying to achieve, as Barry mentioned, we are working very, very closely with the 6 iwi across our region, all 9 councils, and a number of community organizations and growers towards a food system that is sustainable, equitable, and locally led. And so that is the vision of the strategy, and one that centers the well-being of our people and our environment. And so you can kind of see, as Barry also mentioned, it is rooted and foundational in the values of the mana whenua of our region. So that is the first page of your handout. Te Tiro Haum Whakamua is the values of this strategy that have been defined by the mana whenua of our region. And what this plan continues to root into as we develop. And also you can see the future state of the food system that we hope to see. And again, an emphasis on Oranga Taiao, our healthy environment, Oranga Tangata, our healthy people, and Mana Motuhake being locally led. And you can sort of see some examples of the food system that we want to see in the future. And as we think about, I mean, food touches all aspects of our lives, right? It is central to, of course, all 4 of the well-beings that you all are very involved in, incredibly important to our social health, our cultural health, environmental health, and the economic health. And so this strategy really is taking all of those and trying to shift the food system. And of course, the food system is massive, and there's so many pieces to it and many different players. And so that's where council is one of those really important stakeholders and players within the food system. Specifically, you have quite a bit of jurisdiction and decision around land use, around waste, around supporting the incredible community initiatives and mana whenua initiatives that are already happening in your region. And of course, linking that with climate change and biodiversity work that you're doing, preparing for emergency preparedness, and looking at infrastructure. And that's the last handout that I'd just like to direct your attention to, which is another ask sort of for this strategy is looking at how we can embed food into all aspects of what council is doing. And so there's quite a pretty colorful picture here explaining those different avenues that you could try and put a food lens on within your council, and how you can really change the way that our food system is operating locally. And so these are just sort of some foundational examples and some ideas. And I just want to really mihi to you all as a council. You have been quite a leader actually in this space. It's been really wonderful to be able to work with Eddie and Barry and others who are already really involved with Kai in their communities, and really understand some of the needs of the communities, and would love to kind of see that leadership from this council continue as this regional food system plan is developed. As Angela mentioned, we are into phase 2 of this plan, and so there are pilots. To the question before of what pilots are currently happening, there's an incredible pilot happening actually in Wainui and Mara around school feeding and how we can locally source our school products, and how that's going to support our local economy and our tamariki to understand food. And So just would love to, as I said, continue to see that leadership. And there are quite a few other even additional opportunities that we see for councils in terms of where you're procuring your food for events, working with public housing, continuing again to support infrastructure with community hubs, different spaces for growing, and just continuing to really stay involved in the development of this regional strategy, because we believe that the food system can shift on a regional level, and it begins at the local level, and that's where you all are continuing to help lead this. So I'll pause there. That was a long answer, sorry.
Kia ora, Tessa. Thank you for your work. Before I hand it over to the members, very fine framework of results-based accountability there. I can tell that it's the Te Ao Māori framework of it, so well done, congratulate you on that. And we need to do more of that. But I'll hand it over to some questions. Councillor Shaw.
There was a lot of reading in it, and there's a lot of really good aspects to it. This certainly helps. It's great. Just plan on a page, and it explains it all. But there was something in there on page 51. I don't know if you've got access to that to the plan phase 1 report. I'd just like a little bit of an explanation about, because it flashed out to me that in the Hutt city, because of our population and our footprint and our land area, we have a deviation of minus 19,000, as opposed to, say, South Wairarapa district, where they have 239,000. So does that mean that this plan, an overview, helps link us with those areas that have got land to grow, and we all work together?
Exactly, yes. Thank you for interpreting that. That's exactly right. So what that's trying to show is when we consider the additional potentially 200,000 people that plan to reside in this region for the next 30 years, how are we going to feed them? Do we have enough land and resource in this region to feed them? And technically we do, but not every sub-region has enough when we take into account population needs for how much kind of land per person is needed to sustain a population and how much land is available. Peri-urban places like Lower Hutt do not currently have the land to sustain its population solely, which is fine. That's normal for urban areas. Wellington City, of course, Porirua and similar spaces, but that is why we have to rely as a region and work together to be able to have the space and the production to feed our population. Yeah, great question.
Any other questions? Councillor Morgan and then Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Kia ora, thank you for your work. It's really exciting and it's great to be a part of something so important and critical for our communities at large. Just a question around that vision around the educational space, and I know you've got some pilots going, but from my experience in working with some families, you know, you could produce these amazing produce, but how do we use it? How do we know how to use it? And your vision for that, because I can imagine that being an iterative next step of phases that is so critical in order to use that product, that beautiful product or produce really well, and change those cycles of maybe where some foods can be foreign to some families, you know. So any thoughts or discussion on that? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. My background's as a dietitian, so I'm very passionate about that aspect, especially in getting people really getting their hands on food and being able to prepare it and being empowered to prepare it. Under our outcomes framework, Oranga Tangata, you'll see one of the main outcomes is strong food literacy across our populations and institution. So it absolutely is one of the key areas that we're trying to focus on. And actually part of phase 2 is not only these sort of 10 pilots that we've outlined as different parts of the food system, but it's drilling down a little bit more about what does that look like. And so, you know, programs like Garden to Table or Enviro Schools or things like that are starting with tamariki, but we know that we also need more partners within the community who are supporting that cooking, that producing as well. So that absolutely is a strong focus. And as we develop phase 2, we're trying to take these really high outcomes and we're trying to kind of detail them out. And so those will, specifically who can help us support in that, will continue to fall out of that plan. Yeah, kia ora.
Thank you, Tessa, and it's good to hear that you've had a background as a dietitian as well. It's very exciting. Got two questions. One is on the work you're doing is fantastic, and it feeds on from from Councillor Morgan. Imagine we've got the family, they're into their kai, they're cooking and everything. Do we track what's happening with the budget and how their life is going in their pocket? Is that part of the whole kaupapa as well?
You mean in terms of like budget-friendly recipes and things like that?
It's a bit further. I'm imagining that if the money, if the income from the family's been, not diverted, but used, it could be used somewhere else if we're eating somewhere else. If the food's produced by someone else, they're not at a supermarket, they've got more budget in their pocket. How are they now using that budget? Are we wasting? It's just finding out what's happening in the whole house.
Oh, I love that idea so much. That is, I don't think we've gone down to that detail within some of kind of the strategic thinking that we're thinking. But I think that's a perfect example actually of a local initiative that really could start to measure some of those things, and really see how by producing more local food and having more food available, how that's offsetting the really difficult constraints right now of families, because we're obviously in a cost of living crisis. And so we would like, that's kind of where the equity piece comes in, is how are we ensuring that people can afford food? And I think measuring what impact that's having would be a wonderful, wonderful local initiative.
In this colourful roadmap, you mentioned a whole lot of great ideas that would cross over into our district plan. Are we talking to the district plan committee at all, Barry? Question for Barry.
We are indeed. Yep. So we've had discussions with the district plan. As you know, it's a long piece of work, but we have asked them to think about what kind of wording you would have in the district plan that enables and allows, permits the very kind of initiative that we're talking about. I haven't seen the final wording of it, but those discussions have been had.
Thank you, both Barry and Tessa. And as you mentioned, Barry, there has been extensive work and considerations happening now about land and how it aligns with the district plan. So thank you for that. I'll move the motion. Mawai tautoko, do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan. He tohi tō tētahi. Is there any debate? Councillor Barrett, then Councillor Shaw.
Kia ora, Chair. When I was reading this report, I was really heartened. I think there is so much in this report that we could pick little bits and pieces out of it and say, oh yes, that pertains to this, that pertains to that. But what it really took me back to is the communities of yesteryear, how they used to use these community gardens to, and I've put little notes down here, it built communities where they shared resources, where they fed the people, where we had healthy soil, where we had healthy whenua, where we helped with poverty issues. So this report, as wonderful as it is, goes nowhere really to expand in huge details to what we can get through doing this. And that's not meant to sound negative, it's meant to sound really, really positive. This is the most wonderful thing to happen when we take people back to the basics of living in communities, working together, teaching families how to cook, teaching them what to do with their resources, teaching them how to use the leftovers to put into the land, to, to address those issues of climate control. And I just take my hat off to you. I think this is just an excellent report and a great start. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
I think Councillor Barrett's been reading my notes because I'm going to speak similarly. And really, what I'd like to say, it's, when I think about the example that I have here is Hawthorn Street Reserve in Stokes Valley. So it's really an outstanding example of benefits that a marakai can bring to the community. And I thank you, Barry, and the Healthy Families team, along with He Puawai Trust, to get that one underway. From its inception, when the hurricanes came and dug in to create the beds, to now where regular sessions are being held, show whānau how to seed, grow vegetables. It's a beautiful thing to see develop. And I think one of the unexpected benefits have been the social cohesion that Councillor Barrett talked about, where whānau now meet on a regular basis to garden, sit and talk, all ages, tamariki, kaumātua, share kai. It is a really beautiful place to be. And so just in respect to the Hawthorn Street Reserve, I'd also like to thank Joe Inia, who does a lot of work there too. But thank you all for your work, and I think it's fantastic.
Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, team, for the work on this, and it made for very comprehensive reading. I agree with Madam Chair that the framework is excellent, but also I think the narrative and the story that needs to be told to our people is, I think Councillor Barrett made reference to perhaps the market gardens back in the days, and even before then, Te Awakarangi was known as the food basket for iwi across the region, and I recall and I think there's a book on Lower Hutt, the first garden city. So it's going back to the roots and that whakapapa that we have, the relationship that we have with Papa Tuanuku and Te Awakarangi being a food source for others throughout the motu. But the focus of this, of course, being for the household and for neighbourhood. So thank you very much.
Kia ora. I'll just finally say thank you for this work. There has been a lot of mahi done, and Council has been deeply involved now for the last few years. And actually there's been a lot of mobilisation, and there's been a lot of momentum happening now, and it is actually mushrooming in places, Pātaka Kai, He Puawai Trust. There's a lot of Arakura school from garden to plate, and they're really influencing their whānau and the community. Wainui Matahai is starting to look at it at scale with your support. So I think this framework has turned into action. So congratulate you, and we really look forward to continually being involved. Kia ora.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for all your beautiful comments and for your passion and hearts. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tessa. I'll move the motion. I have a seconder. I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. I declare the motion carried. Move to item 6. Parks and Reserves Work Plan. Arthur Nelson, you could come forward. So Arthur, if you've got any further information to add from the report?
Thanks for having me, Chair and councillors. Nothing particular to add to the report, just to say essentially it's about trying to make transparent what we're going to be engaged with over the next wee while, so that people are familiar with what's happening. I'll take any questions.
Partai. Councillor Shaw.
Thanks, Arthur. A great report. It's a really good read. Just a couple of questions, one for my own understanding. Does your Parks and Reserve Plan also support the needs of supporting asphalt areas like the Hutt Valley Netball courts, which is, our biggest sport for women in the Hutt Valley? Do you sort of work with them on their needs as well?
Primarily it's the assets that we control, but we do have an interest, obviously, in people who might be providing separate recreational leisure options, because that way it reduces the cost for council that would have to normally provide those if those weren't being provided by other people. So yeah, we've got a high interest in that, and we're probably going to be looking at talking to those groups a little bit more over the forthcoming months to see if we can perhaps widen some of the activities that are undertaken on some of those netball courts.
Thank you for that, because Hapali Netball did come into the LTP submissions and said, you know, what about us? We need some support here. So it's good to hear that you're doing that. My second question is about the Te Rito, who are based on the old Fraser Park squash building. So Hutt Fest has generated so much multicultural awareness. It's on this week between Monday and Thursday, during the day at night. Thousands and thousands of people involved. And Te Rito are one of those little organisations that provided an affordable performing arts centre. So they still haven't been able to find something suitable for their needs. I know the council have helped them with storage facility, which is great. But how do we still support and encourage something like that that's affordable for all of the interest that's going to fall out of the Hutt Fest? Yeah, just that, how do we support that sort of activity, performing arts?
Unfortunately, I think there is there's a constant conflict in some respects on the great work that some of these groups do, including Te Rito, in relation to the actual assets that they're undertaking that work in, and certainly that that building that we're talking about now has quite a bit of renewals work and quite a few other things that need to be looked at, asbestos and a whole bunch of other stuff. One of the reasons how we're tending to do this at the moment is obviously pushing for that community hub approach, so that, you know, different organisations can co-locate in some of the buildings that may be divested and used by other individuals. So I think it's really about making those connections to ensure that those groups, where they're not in a position to manage the building themselves or the cost of that, provide options where we can introduce them to other people who might be able to give them some space. That's generally where we're going with it.
I think that's exactly where we're at now. The divesting has been considered, but the cost is actually out of their range, and they've provided a service for many years for our community at low cost. And I know there's a community hub model, but some of those costs are still too excessive for their groups. So do we take that into consideration when we're talking with what is out there? And yeah, how can we help these people?
You'll probably recall not too long ago we put something in front of council around Arahonu East Strings, who believe they are in a position to move forward and manage their own facility. As part of that process, we say quite clearly to those groups that if there is room for other groups, and this might be an option for them, that part of that process to allow those leases to go ahead is on the understanding that they try and facilitate other groups as well. So that's essentially where we're going. There is, as you're quite aware, on Fraser Park, another two groups who are looking at potentially taking over the buildings there as well. There may also be options there. I think the fact is, yeah, I mean, it's well understood that these groups provide an awful lot of value in terms of council services, and an awful lot of value in that if they weren't providing, then council would need to provide them or strictly say no. So I think they were pushing against an open door. It's just making sure that we have spaces available. Strangely enough, we don't have that many spaces. So it is more about trying to make those connections to people who may be occupying our land as well.
Thank you, Arthur. Councillor Parkin.
Yeah, sorry, I had myself muted. Thank you, Arthur, for the report. In terms of the Gibbs Watson and Tutakiwi sites, have you had any further updates on the work that has been done with Victoria University and the students in terms of potentially reusing that site? And does the change in the budget that's needed to actually do the demolition change any of our approach at this point?
In answer to the first part of your question, I understand from Rotary that the Vic Uni students will be presenting their finished documents to Rotary shortly. I think the end of this month, possibly. And my understanding from speaking to Rotary is that they are then going to engage probably with council to try and have a bit of a display to show some of these options that might be available for people who are keen to invest in those sites. So that's where we are with regards to the responses. So that's still ongoing a little bit. In terms of the buildings themselves, I have to be quite clear and say the information we've had in terms of their condition suggests that they're at their absolute end of their economic life and viable life. So if there is to be any investment, and it's probably going to be quite significant, which will probably be an area that will need to be considered by anybody who might be interested in moving forwards and investing in those sites.
Thank you. Mayor Barry.
Thanks, Arthur, for the report. Just to touch on a couple of things. First being the comment and the recommendations that notes Parks and Reserves operating budgets will continue to be under pressure and choices will need to be made between increasing budgets or reducing service levels. Is there anything in particular you'd like to highlight? The report covers in a bit more detail the capital budget aspects, and I think there's references to operating aspects through it. But just the report didn't give me clarity around what to expect or when to expect that particular issue, particularly given it's a recommendation here for us to note. So do you want to elaborate on that and just to give us a bit of an idea of timing and when those sort of decisions may come to us?
The obvious one to talk about, I suppose, is with the intensification and densification, obviously a whole new of developers coming into the area. A lot of those developments require the installation of street gardens and so on and so forth. The problem is because we've got a restricting operational budget or that is constrained, we can't continue to accept additional landscaping and street gardens, particularly because those are some of the more expensive items when you take into account things like traffic management. So we're going to have to come up with some process that either allows us to look at our existing asset base and perhaps try and look at ways we can reduce the cost of some of that existing street garden portfolio to accept new stuff. That's one aspect of it. In terms of other aspects of costs that we may see coming forward at the time, we've talked about in the report around art, and again, certainly Director of Dowse has done a fair bit of work around that, but again, we need to start identifying how we're going to fund that moving forwards. And again, it's stuff we will probably coming back in the second half of the financial year with some ideas on how we might be able to manage some of those increasing costs.
So because I think, as you say, touched on sort of under paragraph 26, those sort of different areas which are in the report, but there's nothing else outside of that which is putting major pressure on other than what you've just referenced around art?
Not specifically. I mean, obviously we're engaged in the reserves investment strategy, which will increase costs a little bit, but in comparison to a new site or new gardens that weren't there before, then that will be less because there'll be a certain degree of trade-off in what we're implementing compared to what's already been maintained. There's other things, obviously, on the go, things that relate to the River Link, depending how that pans out. There's obviously a real obvious one on that, is Avalon Skate Park, which is progressing pretty well, but again is potentially going to need a little bit more maintenance and looking after in the short term. So those are the sort of things we've got that I suppose are foremost in my mind about when we move forward and how we might manage these assets.
Just moving to the capital budget. As you mentioned that the last few years we haven't been able to deliver on our total budget, and there's a few carryovers and the likes. I mean, we have approved in the LTP an increase, as you reference, of 74%. So, a significant uplift in that program, and you've mentioned changes to the team to help deliver that. I mean, do you have an indication, based on the resourcing that your team has, on where we would land, or where you think we would land on delivering that total program, or the pressure points as well?
I think some of the problems with with capital, and I'll use the Point Howard Wharf example. Some of the matters we're dealing with are quite complex in terms of how they need to be delivered, and a number of them require quite detailed resource consents, and I think Point Howard Wharf is an obvious one as far as that goes. So one of the reasons Point Howard Wharf wasn't completed last year is because GWRC had some issues in getting the consent. That's certainly my understanding. So I would like to say we will. I mean, certainly the KPI is 80%, I think, and I certainly hope we can deliver that. A lot of it after that is going to really depend on other influences, and I've obviously flagged a few risks or possible risks in the report that might cause us to not fully achieve what we want to do. But I'd be reasonably comfortable that we should achieve at least that 80, 85.
And just for us, when that reporting comes through, can you just remind us how that is reported through to the committee? And I think it would be quite good through the year, and I know there are different ways we report, how we're tracking to council, but to be able to see quite clearly what projects, where they're at, whether this has been held up because of a resource consent issue, it was sort of out of our control, that type of reporting, just so we've got some good oversight, so we know where things are at as best as possible.
So one of the reasons for the realignment is exactly that. I mean, I don't think we have, as a team, necessarily reported effectively to council about where we are and what challenges we've got in delivering capital works. And that's primarily because the current way, or the previous way that the team used to deliver works was pretty much silos. So, each of them had a certain amount of projects to deliver, but there was no overall coordination of that. Now, clearly, that's not the best situation. The best situation is obviously to be able to come to this committee on a regular basis and say, this is where we are with our capital programme, and this is what the problems we've found in our capital programme. And then obviously it's more of a no surprises type arrangement. There's really not a great deal of merit, and it's not particularly fulfilling for my team or myself to come into a situation where you thought you were going to achieve something and you haven't. So, the whole idea of the realignment was really for exactly that, so that we've got a far easier way of reporting to this committee and other people of where we're up to, and a single point of coordination in our team should allow us to do that a lot more effectively.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I think that's great. What would be really helpful from my perspective is, if we had a table here which listed all of the capital, and this may be what you're doing exactly, but all of the capital projects over the year, green, yellow, red, which indicates where they're at, timing, some small comments, doesn't have to be great detail for us, but then that just gives us that confidence of where things are at. And I think avoids a lot of the probably questions that come in through elected members and the likes when people are unsure of what's going on. So I think you've got it, but I just I suppose holding that in mind for when you do produce that information for us. So I'm looking forward to being able to see that.
Yeah, the reporting format you talk about is something that I've used in other authorities, to be quite honest. As I say, unfortunately, I think where we are now, Obviously there's the new procurement team, which I think will bring in a lot more, should we say, professionalism in that area. But as I say, having that individual project, parks project manager planner in our area will also allow us to pull together not just those strands of the of our own existing capital, but we've got a whole bunch of other capital that's being delivered by other parties. And again, if the report talks about Asakura Cemetery and obviously a number of other areas that we need to, that we may not be directly involved in, but we certainly need to have a good overview around.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lewis, last question.
Thank you, Arthur. A good report, as everyone said. There's lots in here. The item I want to talk about is 31, and it might be for our Director, Carl Chittham. It's about the public art on parks and reserve spaces and the fact that options for managing will be presented to council in the future. So it's in the public art space. There's a lot of money needed to put these right. I just wondered with public art, Carl, is there an idea to perhaps work with community groups in this space if there's any training that could be done? Because there's a lot of money there. I don't know if we can afford it by the look of it.
I can answer this, Arthur. The approach we're taking is sort of a collaborative one across teams. So as Arthur identified in his report, public art has not actually had a budget applied to it for maintenance. So it's been coming out of the OPEX budget, a general OPEX budget. So moving forward, we're kind of looking at how we can fund ongoing maintenance of our public art, particularly as we add new works into our collection. Working with community is definitely one of the possibilities, but I think for long-term management, it's really about getting a sense of what the maintenance is to start with. Yep.
Thank you. And I'll just get you to note, Vanessa, about the reporting. And I'll note that across the committee, I think there's a need for us to do more results-based reporting. And the traffic lighting actually could go across quite a lot of the reports, so we know where we're at. So we'll get that as a note from the committee. I'll move the motion. If you could put it up on the screen, please. So the 4 notes there. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tupou. Is there any debate? Mayor Barry.
No, thank you. And just to say, it's really heartening to hear the reporting that has been planned to come through to this committee. I would say that for elected members, parks and reserves and all of our functions within that is one of the most regular things that is raised with us from our community. And I think that as elected members also, because that is often right in people's eye line and experience, we can be pulled sort of pillar to post on what we would like to see done. And it's a real challenge when you can't see the day-to-day, the capital program, the work that's being done currently by the team, for us not to be like, hey, we want you to do this as well, or we want you to go here, because we simply don't really have an understanding of all of the work that is going on. So I think that that good reporting, the work that you're doing, Arthur, and realigning the team is fantastic. I think that just will give us a whole heap more confidence. And for us to be able to explain to our community when they come to us and say, well, why isn't this happening? And say, well, actually, we're prioritising these pieces of work. This is what's happening here. And, you know, that can go into the melting pot later on, or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, just looking forward to that information coming back.
Move the motion. It's been seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Arthur. Well done. I'll now move to item 7, page 90 of the agenda, City Safety and the 6 monthly update. And I'll ask Matthew Maka to come forward. Heidi Kimura. And Langi. Kia ora. So if you have anything extra to cover off to add to the report.
I'll just provide a little bit of context, but take the paper as read. I just had a quick look at the stats today. We're a little bit 6% over the year increase in crime in the last 12 months. We continue to see theft as the primary driver of crime in the city, accounting for 60-70%. We are working with police in this area on a couple of strategic partnerships around this. One with business and economy, with Jonathan Gilbert made reference to the 150k fund. That's working in conjunction with Kia Homa, which is a crime program particularly tailored for retailers. It's always been envisaged those two would go together. If we did it in isolation, we wouldn't get the leverage or the impact we need. We continue to look. He did mention a couple of places in the city. We've future-proofed the city for that and anticipated that, and part of the 10 cameras that I've put aside are in relation to those suburbs already, or being dedicated to those suburbs already.
Anything to add, Slangi? He pātai ngā mema. Councillor Tupou, and then Councillor Barrett, and then Mayor Barry. Councillor Shaw.
Through you, Madam Chair, kia ora, Meka. Just looking at sort of the strategic partnerships at play, such as community patrol, and I just want to note that recently the Mayor's office acknowledged the Māori wardens. Where do you see that relationship moving forward in terms of, I know the Māori wardens are endorsed by mana whenua to work in this crime prevention space?
We've previously used the Māori wardens to great effect outside Bunny Street. You don't see Bunny Street in the news as much as you do previously. We did find with Māori wardens, they had essentially that cultural bridge, which my team didn't have, to get through to people we wanted to speak with. We envision working with them a lot closer. We've got about 3 or 4 projects coming up, which I would love to see Māori wardens in. But every time we've used them on 3 occasions, and they've been brilliant for us. But we are aware that they've got other businesses and jobs to go to, so taxing their time has been quite hard. But I do think that is an untapped asset for Lower Hutt, which I'm really keen to have a look at. So yeah, particularly with our younger youth, we've got a little core pocket of long-term persistent offenders, young fellas, under the age of about 15, 16. I could see that's the bridge we need to use, and I'm endeavouring to use that going forward.
Councillor Barrett.
Kia ora. So I asked Jonathan before which areas of the Hutt did he foresee that has the highest crime rate or perceives to be. And he mentioned areas of Seaview, Petone, Ellistown, southern end of the Hutt itself. One of the questions I was going to ask, and I can ask you now, is does this have any relevance to the still huge rates of boy races, tagging, all that sort of thing?
So he did highlight some suburbs in the city. I've gone through the data for the last 20 years. We have 5 suburbs of interest. The CBD around Queensgate, Petone, the top end between those anchor stores, kept and do things like that, Moira, Wainui and Nainai. So Petone and the CBD are overrepresented in theft predominantly. So essentially 40% of all theft in the city occurs in those 2 places. So if we attack those 2 places, we've got 3 cameras going into Petone around those anchor stores at the top end. As for antisocial behaviour, boy race and things like that, they are sporadic and hard, they're hugely mobile. So those, in particular for suburbs and policing, I get a boy racer convoy from Wellington coming to Lower Hutt, and they spend 40 minutes there before going to Palmerston North or Plymouth, and it's really hard to police. I see some, what I would like to say about those 2 is, particularly boy racers, they get a lot of attention, but overall in comparison to the whole crime stats, they're not a huge driver of what we see in Lower Hutt. And I see the police have already taken a couple of efforts in the last 2 weekends, brought the Eagle down. So they're working in that space, but to be honest, the numbers there aren't representative of the harm happening in the community. They get the media attention, but the real harm is possibly family violence, assaults, robberies, theft, burglary, theft of cars, things like that.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. My question's about, and I know that Safe City ambassadors have gone, by the way. I'm just looking at page 93, paragraph 20. Retailers, our Safe City facilitators, Manutaki, have continued patrols of retail areas, particularly in 3 areas. And you maintain a presence response to bigging and antisocial behaviour. Does that also include incidents of where people are being harassed with mental health issues? If somebody is in that situation, they ring the police, they ring this group, where do they go to?
We've regulate channels for them, so we've anticipated this, and we're ready for it. So we do have a homeless contract with Takiri Mai. Also mental health, we've already started working with our partners in Hutt around the pickup. So I feel pretty comfortable in that space that, hey, we've got our avenues and resources, and sometimes they might be overloaded. But we do have part of that retail training session is mentioning, hey, who to call, when to call, why to call. And also working with neighbourhood support with Cat Downs around the similar sort of thing. But we do have channels and resources at the council that the call centre knows who to call for what reason, and we've anticipated this.
Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions, so I'll go through them if you're happy with that. The first one on page 93 of the agenda, dot point 21 of your report. It says that you kind of touched on it lightly during the introductory comments, but the fund's scope and scale will be widened. Can you let us a bit know now kind of what the current criteria is for the business support fund, and what are you proposing to change as well?
Okay. Sorry. The criteria for the fund was one, well, there's a number of criteria. Firstly, you're in those retail hotspots of Batoni and the CBD. Secondly, you had to have craved items. It's a term relating to theft, about more stolen items. So Thin Lizzy, cosmetics, vapes, alcohol, meat, all those things. That also indicated if you're a lone worker, extended business hours. So there's about 5 or 6 criteria off the top of my head to go through to understand the risk to individual stores. So that was our first piece. So yeah, and that business support fund is not simply CCTV, it's fog cannons, bollards, mirrors, panic alarms, things like that as well. We got increased scope because we were crossing over with the police's national fund. The national fund is for aggravated robbery and ram raids. So essentially some of the high risk or high profile stores we thought, when talking to police, overlapped with their fund. So essentially police are going to pay for some of the stores in Lower Hutt because they meet their criteria. And that's why we can expand probably outside of those 2 major retail, Batoni and CBD, because the police are taking those high profile or high risk stores from us. So they've got a national fund, so we're just trying to get bang for buck essentially.
And to date, how have local businesses been able to apply for this fund? I've looked for information on the website and I can't find anything of what that criteria is or how local businesses are meant to approach council. How have they had opportunity to date?
So it was always envisioned to roll out with the Kia Homer, so they would be getting those details on that first training session. So as we go, we're targeting the CBD first in particular, but that information will be handed out at the first training session. The first training session is super important.
And so for my clarity going forward, how are we going to be publicising it so that businesses can self-identify and apply for the fund? Because at the moment, I can't see how they can do that because it's unclear to me.
Yeah,
thank you. Councillor Briggs, I think we also need to strike the balance of making this the most effective spend. Potentially there are 1,000 retailers or businesses that could be part of this fund, and $150,000 goes a very small way to having an effective measure for them in their stores. So I guess we recognise that up front, and that's why there may have been silence from your perspective, because we're taking a targeted approach to seeing where there is most need for that. So Macca has been out visiting individual businesses right across the city in terms of understanding the incidents that have happened, responding to those immediate needs, and gathering that intel in terms of that need as well. And so from there we have gathered or essentially built a list of businesses who potentially can benefit from this fund, and then we will use the information we gather through holding those retailer training programs to then further enhance our understanding of what that need is. I think I do re-emphasise that point of the intent of this fund was to meet a need, but do it in a targeted and effective way. If this became a lolly scramble, it would be, the administrative burden would be large, and there would be a very small benefit.
Okay. A few more questions. Thanks, James, for your input. While there's an impact from retail theft, we can all understand on businesses, in your report as well, you note around youth violence, and that can pose a serious threat to all community safety. How are we balancing these concerns in our overall approach for community wellbeing between retail theft and violence?
So that, yes, go on. High-end violence has been going down, but it is a concern. This is why we are targeting that particularly vulnerable group, those long-term offenders or long-term persistent offenders. So that's it's probably easier to give me an example. I'll give you an example. For the Bunny Street area, we had about 150, 180 kids causing multiple incidents. The way we got leverage through that was the Marae, Kokiri and Marae, expanded their afternoon program for about 20 or 30 of at-risk kids. So we had the enforcement option, but the long-term results were community-based, essentially out at Kokiri. So that's what we continue to do. So what we use city safety for is just to break cycles. We can break up cycles for about 5 or 6 weeks. But without community support, Marae, schools, neighbourhood watch, whatever you want to call it, they can't be maintained. So a good example is, my high-risk offenders travelling from Wainui into the CBD Bunny Street, committing aggravated robberies, carrying weapons. That was essentially minimised or dispersed by simply rolling out or extending an afternoon school program at the community hall.
And so that flows nicely into my next question and last question, Chair, which is, what evidence do we have around focusing on retail crime, that it's an effective approach as opposed to proactive early intervention around preventing violent crime in our communities and those hotspot areas? Like, do we have any evidence around where we should be focusing and what's most effective?
We do have evidence, and that's that those 5 suburbs are those 20-year data. So we know the different crime sets throughout the city. So theft, Petone and CBD. But if I went to Wainui, it's aggravated robbery, violence and sexual assaults. If I went to Nile, it's Nainai, it's theft ex car, stealing cars. So there's different patterns throughout the city, and we're aware of them. And we treat them a little differently, particularly around the demographic, age and sex. We'll change what we're going to do. I'm not going to treat a 40-year-old with the same discretion as a 15-year-old.
And so that's an overview of kind of what's occurring in those communities, but what evidence do we have around where we should be putting our focus and what's going to be the biggest impact for our community wellbeing, whether it's retail theft or violent crime? Again, I know we have limited resource, and so I'm just trying to understand around what evidence are we working from on where we should be best placing our energies to have the best impact for our community.
Our best impact is around that theft because it's the main driver, but when you talk about victimisations and prolonged damage, that's a little bit different. So theft affects a whole lot of people. It goes from, but what we are seeing is that those violent offenders are also thieves, also robbers and things like that. So understanding their mindset is pretty key. But to target, there's a flow-on effect. Essentially, because of the way the city's laid out, if we focus on the CBD, by default, by getting theft, targeting theft, we also have a displacement of violence, assaults, things like that. So targeting on those CBD and the Petone, which are all crime happens, by a default of realising what's happening with theft or understanding training for retailers how to diffuse situations, we can ultimately affect downstream from that.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I saw in the report, in the Neighbourhood Watch, there was a meeting, and I really liked the concept, and Andy Mitchell was involved, coffee with a cop and a councillor, and I thought that was something that could be rolled out in other places. Do you think that's something the police would be interested in doing?
Oh, they've already approached and they're already keen, so they're working with Cat Downs through that. But what's important for them, there's a term we call black crime stats. So it's unreported crime. So every time you have a coffee with a cop, the community sees an avenue or a channel of information or an informal resource they can use. So quite often, coffee with a cop results in more crime being detected. So we're looking to do that.
Mayor Barry.
Thank you. I suppose just a few questions. First off, just to touch on the business support fund, how much has actually been spent from that? And from that spend, where has it gone? I mean, you've touched on the retail and the focus and the likes, but how much has been spent? And obviously, what's the plan with the carryover into this year?
So nothing has been spent to date in terms of dollars to businesses, but there is a plan of action through July and August to enact on that.
What reporting has been done over the last 12 months on this fund to council? What reporting have you been doing on, this was quite a significant commitment that we made in our annual plan, and particularly in response to what we heard from our business community through that consultation period. And what reporting have you done over the last 12 months? Or is this the first time you've kind of filled the committee in on what the plan is?
Yes, this will be the first time because fell between those reporting periods. But I've been liaising with Peter Lowry and James here for some time, but probably this will be the first time.
In reflection, should we have been reporting, particularly with the focus and the shift from councillors' expectations of what that fund was for versus where it's gone now? And should have you engaged with us on changing that path?
Perhaps can answer that. Yes, sure, we should have. And on reflection, then we will take that on and make sure that we do that moving forward. I take your point to Councillor Briggs that finding a different avenue to advertise about the criteria and how others can self-refer, but we're working on it in a plan to make it available. And I know the urgency around it, and that's why we had that put into the annual plan. But in short, yes, we should do.
For me, I'm asking these questions because when we set up this fund, it was clearly envisioned, and I can recall at the time, it was clearly envisioned that it would be a place where businesses could see a criteria that they could apply for funding to support them with safety mechanisms, whether that be CCTV or the likes. I totally agree with the process of going, well, actually, there might be some overlap of different funds and we don't want to duplicate that. But it is quite a significant shift of what you've outlined, and we can, that's fine. Things change, but that really should be coming back through to a committee level for us to be able to understand that. And I completely understand why people like Jonathan would come to the table and say, well, what the heck's going on around these types of issues for people who are, seeing the announcement of that. We made quite a big deal about it and really not feeling like there's been any progress. I'm not saying there hasn't been, but over the last 12 months. So that's hopefully a reflection we can take.
Noted.
have to answer that. Okay, the other questions. Do we have another report coming around CCTV, or is this the sort of extent of what the plan is?
There's a project manager for that, and I just saw a report today. It's going to be published. Well, there's a timeline with that. So I don't have it in front of me, but yes, it will be sent upstairs.
I suppose I'm all for us looking to install more CCTV cameras, but over the last year and a half, I've been told, a number of different reasons why that's not possible. We should be looking at the current cameras, the network, but all things that make logical sense. And now I read in a report that because of the sudden, surge in crime, we're installing 10 cameras. So, I mean, for me, it just doesn't connect with other parts of council and what they've been communicating through to us. And it feels like, are we talking, we've got the IT team who have been doing some of this work. We've got the city safety team. Are you guys communicating? Are you working together on an overall sort of picture of how we deal with CCTV across the city?
Yes, we are. Just to put into context, essentially the architecture for IT is broken around CCTV. What I've done is those 10 cameras been a slow preparation for this transition. So it's the mindset, as we progress through this transition to a new architecture, I'll be ready to go. If I was to add a new camera right away, it would pull the whole system down, or some variation of that, or some sort of anomaly. So the 10 cameras I've been speaking with IT, but they've just been in preparation for the moments coming up. The IT project is supremely hard, and it's you're dealing with Liquid, Telecom, Chorus, about 5 different vendors to change our architecture or implement things. So I'm only downstream from that, but I've recognised that I need to be prepared when our structure is sound, we're ready to go. So we are in talks. When you see 10 cameras out of the blue, it just means that I've saved my money and I've bought them in bulk in the last few months because I can do that. So literally maybe once a week I'm talking with IT around CCTV, where's the progress, working with the 90 Pool Community Centre, Riverlink, all sorts of stuff. It's a complex piece, and even I think the council would understand, pools, libraries have their own separate cameras, separate software, separate models, different privacy, different managers, different funds. So that piece of work which we are working on is consolidating that, streamlining, ensuring those privacy aspects, finelining that IT aspect. So yeah, when you see 10 cameras, it's not out of a blue, it's me deliberately saving money or reducing costs so I can buy in bulk in preparation as we move forward.
I appreciate that, and I think this comes back to what has been reported to us. We don't know what we don't know. What you've just said there makes complete sense. I mean, sense in the respect of a very complicated IT, so which we know that's sort of across the board here at council. So, I mean, my ask would be that when, I think at the soonest possible time, to have a report that looks to bring all those aspects together as well. So that would be greatly appreciated if something could come before either this committee or to council. Yeah.
Noted and delivered.
Any further questions? I'll move the motion. The committee receives and notes the information in the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett. Move the motion. It's been seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. I declare the motion carried. Kia ora. Thank you, Matthew Langi. I'll call up next. Item 8 is whakatupu ngaingai, page 98 of the agenda. And we've got Andrew here. Kia ora, Andrew. Haere ki mua.
Kia ora tātou. Haere mai. This is the progress report for Whakatupu Nainai for the month of May 2024. At the weekend, we opened Tamako, Naino's Community Centre, to large crowds. Everyone was delighted with not only the finish, but also the artwork that was installed inside. Kai Whakarari is now working to increase the usage and organically grow the use of that community centre. So we're delighted with the result of that particular part of the project. But we have two other parts to focus on. So next up is our pool. Pool, we're on schedule for, at the moment, late 2024, and the date we're given from the contractor is end of September, early October, which means we can transition into operations probably around about the end of October. But as the paper notes, we won't declare that firm date until probably 6 to 8 weeks out. And that's wise, given we still have a way to go before we're finished. But otherwise, the team there are working really well. And we're really happy with the progress and also the way that Apollo have worked with our local supply chain. We've set out a target of 80% through local suppliers by value of contract and labour hours, and we're pretty much on that target right now. So that's been really good. And I guess the last note really is the development of the park in front of the community centre. We shared a few designs at the opening of Tamako on Saturday. Got some really good feedback, and there are some concept design images for your information attached to this paper. Otherwise, take the rest of the paper as read and answer any questions.
Kia ora, Andrew, and once again, well done. Questions, members? Councillor Tupou.
Through you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, thanks for the report. Just a question, because it was good to be there on the weekend for Te Mako, but and waiting for my coffee, there some of the members of the community were talking about the pool, and so there's a bit of confusion around the timeline, sort of from now to opening. I see that you've put the about an announcement will come forth in about 2 months prior to the opening. I don't think we've had any. There has been some comms on the pool construction itself via our Facebook page. When would we be at a point where we can actually update the community on the timeline between now and opening?
We've got a really good flow diagram that describes what activity we're doing between now and opening. I'm happy to share that flow chart through this committee. That would help, I think, to outline to the community what's left to do and the relative stages and the key milestones. As I say, we're preparing for a grand opening, but given we've still got a way to go and we've still got winter here with us, we want to take the opportunity to confirm a firm date closer to the event rather than now and miss that date. So I don't know if that answers your question, but...
No, that does, thank you. And so, but hopefully when I've told people it will be this year, I'm sort of somewhere in the region of...
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for the report again. I noted it was just over a year ago that you started the Te Mako project, and that's fantastic. My question was, from a takeaway from that project, you seem I just want to know what your best takeaway was from working in the Te Mako space.
We're about to launch into some lessons learnt workshops. We're going to do one with the supply chain and one with the community. I think if I were to pick one from each, the supply chain would all be about our design, procurement, build strategy and making that scalable and appropriate to the nature of the project. I think I recall an earlier conversation where we switched with the pool and changed to a design build model, whereas with the community, we went for a fully designed and then full build. and that suited our risk profile and also the nature of that project. So I think the takeaway from the supply chain is be flexible when it comes to a procurement method, and also be prepared to change it if market conditions shift around you. The pool is a 4-year project, and we took the opportunity with the fluctuations of the market post-COVID to change that strategy. So that would be my one for the supply chain. For the community, just working together. The number of people I heard say those guys were fantastic. They actually listened to what we said. The trick is actually doing something with it. I mean, you can't just listen. You actually, it needs to be implemented, and it has to be, given in good measure with regard to the budget and the timeline and stakeholder expectations. But I think we have a great model of how to work with that community, how to be respectful, how to listen, but also to implement and tell people how you're implementing.
Thank you. Mayor Barry.
Thanks, Andy. I've got nothing to be grumpy about from this report from today. Congratulations with the milestone on the weekend. Fantastic day for the community, so well done. Just in regards to the next steps of sort of now that centre being sort of more BAU operationalised and Team 9i taking over the day-to-day running, how involved are you with, I suppose, any matters that I suppose is, teething issues with the facility, which you're always going to have in something new, or does that shift over to sort of our facilities team and the likes?
Great question. I am working both with the operator, with Team 9i, with Lani, with the rest of the team, just to make sure that we get to 100% complete. So all of those expectations are set. We've still got 1 or 2 tasks left to do, some minor defects and a few bits and pieces that we said we do that we will do. My anticipation is we'll finish that by the end of July, so that'll be 1 month post completion. Meantime, the communities team have already stepped into that space and now managing it as a BAU project. I guess the answer to the question is I'll carry on working with that team for as long as they need, noting that most of the work now is in the maintenance phase and it's all about operation. And actually, it's all about making that community centre a success and boosting the revenue and, making sure that people will come. It's a bit of... if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, gotcha. What about things? So I, through the process, heard from Team 9i Trust and others who talked about, for example, the need for storage in that community centre. And I understand that there's been conversations around changing that to office space or the like. So issues like that, is that being worked through the Luggies team or others? And yeah, how do we work through those types of issues that now that Team 9i Trust are operating the space? Who makes the final decisions? If you know the answer to that question.
I know where the question has come from. So it was a desire by the operator to use some of the storage space for office accommodation. It wasn't really appropriate to use that space, A, because it's not ventilated, and B, it doesn't even have a glass screen or a window in the door. So it wasn't the best use of that space, but we spoke to the operator and we asked what he was trying to get out of the process. And it was really just to find some quiet time because, that coordinator's there from 9:30 to 5:30, Monday to Friday and Saturday too. Can need a bit of quiet time and some space away from main reception. So we're just trying to work with him to find out how we can use the facility as designed to do what it is that he wants to do, because they're learning how to use the space and we're learning how that space was configured to make best use. We're not planning on any design changes, if that answers your question.
I think for me, I just heard loud and clear the need for storage space, and then you hear that, space is suddenly being turned into offices, which is not quite, I think, the community expectation. So I suppose it would just be a case of certainly from my perspective anyway, hold firm on what we've laid out to our community, albeit understanding that things change over time. But I think you want to, sort of 6 months to go under the bridge of how a space works before you make those types of calls. Sounds like you're across it. Sounds like.
Any further questions? I will put the motion forward and we'll put them up on screen. We receive and note the information and the 3 noting points. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan. Put the motion, and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. All those against no. Declare the motion carried. We will move to Kia ora, thank you, Andy. Thank you for your mahi.
Kia ora.
We'll now move to Neighbourhoods and Communities Directors Report, page 107, and I'll hand it over to Carl Chittum, Acting Director.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the Director's Report as read. Just point to note is that all the facilities currently have an upward trend in terms of visitation, which is really great, particularly post-pandemic, and pools and hubs are looking like they will meet their targets this financial year, just gone. And I'm open to questions, but nothing too tricky because all my colleagues have deserted me.
He pātainga mema, any questions? Nope. Looks pretty straightforward, Carl. There you go. I'll move the motion. Committee receives and notes a report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett. Move the motion. It's been seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. Declare the motion carried. We'll move to the final item, the committee forward program, page 125. Does any member have a question? Councillor Lewis, Deputy Mayor Lewis.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just an update from the Director, please, and for the next report, if we could have, if you could update us now, for the Bullcott Memorial project for the coming year, financial year, where will it fit into, please?
The Bullcott Memorial funding has only just kicked in, so we're looking to procure a researcher and a concept developer, which will help us move the project forward. We're set to deliver the outcome, assuming that working alongside the community allows us to do that by the end of this financial year. So the project is set to be delivered this financial year. We're hoping to get our first meetings with the kai pūrākau, or the respondents that we worked with in the previous research before the end of the year. Again, assuming that they're available for that.
I will move the motion that the forward program 2024 of Komiti Hapuri Ahurea me ngā Rangapu be received and noted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Councillor Shaw. It's been a long meeting. I have the motion. It's been seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. I declare the motion carried. I have received no questions. We'll just bring up the ending karakia. Inoi tātou, mai te tohi rangi ki te tohu noku, te aho i roto, marama i roto, tupu mauri ora, ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama, haumie, hui e, tāiki e. Thank you, everybody.